Before we move forward with modes, I'd like to really make sure that you're comfortable with the positions. This series of lessons is very progressive, and if you haven't mastered the previous lesson, then go back to it, please, because you really need to follow all the steps if you really want to be comfortable with modes. So let's do a little exercise, if you will. We're going to take an A note on the 6th string, the low E string, that's on the 5th fret. And from that note, I'd like you to play a natural 4th above. If you're playing right now on the 5th string, 5th fret, you're on the right track. Let's do another one. Let's take a root, same thing. Let's go on the 6th string, low E string, on the 7th fret. That's a B note. And from that note, I would like you to play a minor 6th above that note. So if you reached the 5th string, 10th fret, you're good to go. If these two examples were not something that you're really comfortable with, please go back to the previous lesson, because in order to really understand modes, you need to follow all the steps of this lesson. So just go back to the previous one, make sure that you memorize the different diagrams that I gave you in order to find the different intervals that we're going to talk about. And if you are okay with that previous lesson, if you mastered everything, then we're ready to move on to the actual subject of our main lesson, modes. So we're going to talk about what modes really are and where they come from. But in order to do that, we need to take a look at a major scale. For the purpose of this exercise and to demonstrate what we're going to talk about, let's take a G major scale. A major scale has 7 different notes, and if I were to take a blank guitar neck and write all the notes that I would have in G major, this is the diagram that we will have. So as you see, it's really confusing. There are a lot of notes, and the reason is, on the guitar, you can play the same note on different frets. As we spoke about in the previous lesson, those octaves, an octave is pretty much the same note played higher or lower. So that's why we have a lot of different notes here. But these notes, once again, are just G major notes that are repeated all over. So anytime that I find a note that is in the scale of G major, I will copy that on the fretboard. So as you see, it's very confusing because of the numbers of notes. And if you were to try to memorize that scale, it would be a huge scale, a lot of work, and it would be very confusing to you. So we're going to split that big scale into 7 different parts. And why 7? Because, as I said, we have 7 notes in a major scale. So we're going to divide that big scale on the whole fretboard into 7 different parts, each part being a fraction of that scale, starting from one of the 7 notes of that scale. And we're going to divide it in a way that we're going to have 7 different fretboard areas right here. We're going to have 7, and if we were to drag and drop these 7, we would get that big G major scale. Now it's going to be easier to memorize. So we have 7 positions. 7 positions, once again, starting from the 7 notes of a major scale. These positions can be referred as position number 1 for the position that's going to start with the first note of the major scale, position number 2, position number 3, and so forth. But to simplify and to facilitate what we're really going to talk about, let's give these positions modal names. They're going to have different names. The first position, which is the position that starts with the first note of the major scale, is going to be called Ionian, the Ionian mode, also known as the major scale. The second position, which is the one just on the right side, starting on the second note of a major scale, is going to be called the Dorian mode. The third position is going to be the Phrygian mode. The fourth position, the Lydian mode. The fifth position, Mixolydian mode. The sixth position is going to be called the Aeolian mode, and that Aeolian mode is also known as the natural minor scale. And the seventh and last position of our diagram is going to be called the Locrian mode. So 7 positions, 7 modes, that's the basic. So as you see, these 7 different modes or positions are all linked together because extracted from a common major scale. So that principle of extraction from a same major scale is going to be very helpful in order to play all over the fretboard. Basically, we're going to use modes as positions, simply following each other and enabling us to play all over the fretboard and develop a good fretboard knowledge. And that's going to help us maybe sound a little different, because if you stick to just one position, maybe the major scale here, all your licks, all your improvisations are going to sound pretty much the same because of the fingering that you chose. Some licks are going to be more comfortable in that particular fingering, and after a while you'll probably sound pretty much the same all the time. Whereas if you knew all the 7 different positions, which are modes, if you knew them in order, then it would be easier to develop some different kind of ideas, because the fingerings are going to be different, and therefore you're not going to be as comfortable as with one position, and that's going to kind of force yourself to let your ear direct what your fingers are playing, as opposed to your fingers directing what your ear hears. I hope that makes sense, but basically what I'm trying to say is that you're trying here to use these positions as tools to really be able to have a strong connection between what you hear in your head and the instrument. So that's the first step, and what I would like you to do in this time is really take time, memorize the names of these 7 positions, go over that concept, make sure that you understand that they follow each other, they're all related to each other, they're all linked together because extracted from a common major scale. Make sure that you know the names of these positions, and make sure that you know how to play them. You really need to spend time memorizing these 7 different positions. Now, about fingering a little bit, because of the way the guitar is laid out, there are a lot of different fingerings out there for the same scale. That is because on your instrument you can play a note here, and I will have the same exact note here, and so forth. You can find the same exact note on different spots of the guitar, and that is why we're going to have a lot of different fingerings. The fingerings that I chose to deal with for our introduction to modes is going to be really effective when we're going to play over chords and stuff like that. So spend time working on these fingerings, and later on in the tutorial we will discuss other types of fingerings, but for now please spend time really making sure that you have these fingerings really known, along with the names of the modes, and make sure you know the order. So let's take another look at these 7 different positions. We've got the Ionian position, and if we're in the key of G major, this is how it should sound like. And then the next position on the right side, starting on the 2nd note of that Ionian position, will be the Dorian mode, and we're going to start on the A note right here on the 5th fret, 6th string. Here's how it should sound like. The 3rd position, also known as the Phrygian mode, here is how it sounds like. Moving on to the 4th position, the Lydian mode, here it is. It's very close to the Phrygian mode, actually. And then the next position, the 5th position, is the Mixolydian mode, and here it is. Moving on to the 6th position, the Aeolian mode, also known as the natural minor scale. Here it is. And here is the last mode, the Locrian mode, the 7th mode, and here is the position of the Locrian mode. And then if we were to continue, we would reach our Ionian mode, which was the first mode we started an octave higher. So all these modes kind of follow each other. So now spend time memorizing these modes along with their names and the order of these modes before we move on to the next step.